Shared in the following program are not those necessarily held by this station.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Voices of Refined Soul. My name is Florence Brewer, and I'm just so ecstatic to be here. Truly happy, as it's been a while. It's been some time since I've been in the studio, and it's just a great feeling, and my spirit is just on fire right now. So I'm really excited to see what God is going to do within the next 30 minutes and just to see the way he wants to speak and move in this place. Before we begin, I want to give a moment of silence. One of my friends here in the studio, Tomas, he lost one of his younger brothers who barely made 30. And then of course, you know, Steve Jobs, Mr. Apple, I just call him Mr. Apple, also passed away. And I'm sure that they both had different impacts, but still nonetheless very much impacted someone's life at some point in time. So I just want to give a moment of silence to them, and we honor them in this time. Okay. Well, speaking of Steve Jobs, I actually wanted to start out with a quote of his, in his passing yesterday. How I found out was through Facebook. If ever you're disconnected from the world, just pick up your phone and look on Facebook and you will know what's going on. Because all of a sudden I saw all these things about RIP and I was just like, what's going on? And then I realized that he had passed. But one of my friends from work actually posted a comment that really spoke to me. And this is what it said. It says, your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do and believe, to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, just don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know it when you find it. And like any great relationship, it gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking until you find it. Don't settle. And that's Mr. Steve Jobs, and he got that great quote. So today, speaking of that quote, it just made me think of some of the things I've gone through recently. Obviously traveling a lot and trying to maintain my business and trying to think of how I can keep afloat and just so many different things. And throughout this time in my absence, the enemy has really tried to attack me, quite frankly. He's presented every D word that I could think of. And I say D word because what comes to my mind is discouragement, disappointment, delay, dismay, all these D words that often negatively have an impact on someone's life. And so that's what I want to talk about today. How do you handle when you're going through a discouraging time, a disappointment time? Mr. Steve Jobs said that to keep looking, to keep moving forward, to keep pushing until you find the thing in which you are searching for, until you find that thing that you love. And for some of us, we have found that love, but you're just at a stage where you're just like, okay, now what do I do? What do I do with this thing, the thing that I treasure, and I have a passion, I have a fire for it inside of me, but how do I continue to obtain it, or how do I take it to the next level? And so I just want to talk about those things for a little bit, and I hope that I can be a word of encouragement to someone who is truly discouraged in this time. And so first, let's start off with discouragement. When I think of discouragement, the overall definition is to deprive of courage, to deprive of hope, confidence, to be disheartened, to be dispirited. And what comes to mind is Deuteronomy 31, verses 6 through 8. And this is when they were transitioning, the people of Israel. They were transitioning between Moses as their leader and now Joshua is being summoned to continue the journey. And so this is what Moses says to them. He says, be strong and be courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua, and he said to him in the presence of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you must go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them, and you must divide it amongst them as their inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. So one thing I want to talk about real quick is that discouragement is a choice. You know, some of the other feelings like disappointment, delay, we really don't have a lot, we can't really change that. Being disappointed when something doesn't really follow through is just a natural reaction. And obviously if there's a delay, it's really out of the control of your hands. You just have to deal with that delay. But discouragement is something that we do have choice over. To say, you know what, I'm not going to be influenced by the events that are currently going on around me, but I'm choosing to not be discouraged, but I will be encouraged. You see, because when there's darkness around, you can always look to God to be your light in the midst of darkness. And that right there should bring encouragement into your situation, to know that this is only temporary, that it's not everlasting, but that God will soon shine his light onto your situation and bring you to great heights. And so in this passage, he's saying to be strong and to be courageous. And I believe as Christians that that's our call. That is our call, to put on that full armor of God, to stand there and be strong. Because there's been several times in my journey and in everybody's journey through life where you've hoped, wished, you've been praying for something to come through. And at some point in time, you're just like, man, how am I going to handle this? How do I continue with this? What do I do? You just don't even know where to start at times. And the enemy tries to use discouragement. He tries to take away your hope. He tries to make you feel unconfident so that you cannot go further. You see, in this scripture, Joshua and the Israelites, they have to go into the land that they were promised. In verse 7, Moses says unto them, be strong and courageous. You must go with these people into the land that the Lord swore for their ancestors to give them. And so I looked at that, and it made me think about how sometimes we have to go to places we don't necessarily want to go at times, especially when you're discouraged. You know, Moses was saying here that God has promised you all this land, that he has promised your ancestors, and this is supposed to be your inheritance. But at the same time, you must go. And so the command here is to go, to go. And as I read this, that's what was streaming through my veins. It was saying, go, move forward. Sometimes you just got to press through. And so that's the thing. Oftentimes when we are discouraged, it prevents us from moving forward. You see, discouragement makes you sort of think like, what's the point? It makes you just want to give up on a situation. It makes you not want to put forth any effort. It takes away your overall motivation, and it prevents you to move forward. But I want you all to always remember this, that oftentimes when you are close to your inheritance, when you are close to the very promise that God has placed upon your heart, that is when the enemy is going to come and try to discourage you. That's when he's going to bring a discouraging factor. That's when he's going to try to steal your joy. He's going to try to take away your courage. You see, because when people are afraid of things, they don't act. Yeah, I think about my friend, and yesterday we were having a conversation about roller coasters. And because she's scared of roller coasters, she just chooses to avoid them. Won't even mess with it. Just looks at one, like can't even barely even look at a roller coaster because she's so terrified of it. And so the enemy knows that if we are fearful of certain things, we won't even look at it. And so sometimes that thing that we may look at as forbidden land, that's the place where God has for us to go, because that's the place where he has provided our treasure. That's the place where he has promised to our ancestors, where he has promised that that is our inheritance. But all we see is the fear factor, and that prevents us from going forward. And so it says here to be courageous. So sometimes I think of the lion from The Wizard of Oz, and how he was such a scaredy cat. You know, he truly was. He was a scaredy lion. You know, and he was terrified of everything. And look at all the things he missed out of due to fear. And a lot of times, a lot of those things were more figment of his imagination than they were truly reality. And so many times, because the enemy tries to discourage us and fear starts to build up in us, we start to create these mega scenarios in our head that are really not reality. Once again, my same friend who we were talking about her being scared of roller coasters, it all stemmed from she had a new position in her job, and she had to call up a couple people and make some cold calls over the phone. And she was terrified. And the thing is, my friend, she's such a mingler, just a little social butterfly. When we go out, I mean, she talks to anybody, everybody. First time meeting you, she'll crack jokes with you. But at the same time, this girl was terrified to pick up the phone and make a phone call. And so we were just talking about facing your fears. And basically we spent the time on the phone having a pep talk about how you have to face your fears. And in her head, she created this elaborate situation of how she was going to call somebody and they were going to cuss her out and just all these horrible things. She turned to the negative side of things instead of thinking of the positive. And so finally today I asked her, how'd it go? And she told me, I faced my fears and I did it and I feel great. And that all the negative things that she once thought was going to happen, they never even came to pass. It was all a figment of her imagination. And the enemy was trying to use that fear factor to prevent her from stepping out, to prevent her from moving forward into what it is God has for her. Because this is a new business in which she's good at it, and I wish her much success, and I'm sure she will thrive with it. But at the same time, she has to take some risk and sometimes come out of her comfort zone in order to obtain that. And so the enemy often uses discouragement to continue to prevent us from going. He tries to dishearten us. He tries to dispirit us. He just tries to weaken us. And so many times when we are weak as an individual, like a weak person, you just sort of lay there. You just sort of lay there and take the beating. You know, you don't have the energy, you don't have the strength, you don't feel motivated and determined. But here it is. Here it is, we're in the fourth quarter of the year. And I want to tell somebody that you will finish this year strong. Be courageous here at the end of this year so that you can start 2012 on a great and a high note. And so another thing that the enemy often uses is big brother disappointment. That is another D in which he always uses disappointment. And for me, this is one that I struggle with a lot. And you know, sometimes in my head, I create, on the opposite side, instead of thinking negative, I create these overly positive situations in my head. And sometimes things will fail or they don't fulfill my expectations. And so recently, the enemy, I was truly believing something, and I knew, I was like, you know what, I may have been disappointed in the past, but not this time. And so the enemy come, and of course he tries to tell you, well, you know, that didn't happen before. What makes you think it's going to happen this time? You know, I mean, like, you just tried that and it didn't work out. Like, what makes you think it's going to work out this time? But every time is different, because we serve a God who, he may have a little denial or a little disappointment one time, but you're not going to go through life in full disappointment. I'm assured of that. And so the scripture I want to talk about is Isaiah 41, verses 9 through 13. And it reads, I took you from the ends of the earth. From its farthest corners I called you. I said, you are my servant. I have chosen you and not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am with you. I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. All who rage against you will surely be ashamed and disgraced. Those who oppose you will be as nothing and perish. Those who search for your enemies will not find them. Those who wage war against you will be as nothing at all. For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. And so when I was reading verses 9 through 10 in particularly, where God is basically saying, I called you, I chose you. He's saying, I picked you, I handpicked you to be my servant. I have chosen you, and he's saying, I have not rejected you. What comes to my mind is, and I'm sure this is probably a horrible metaphor, but what really comes to my mind is a dog and their master. I think of someone going to like a dog shelter, and you know, you see all these dogs who have been through ups and downs and all these struggles, but finally they go to this shelter. And I'm sure they sit there day after day, and they see people come in and probably see people picking all these other dogs around them. And I'm sure the dog is like, when am I going to get a home? until one day their master comes in. And for some reason, whenever you hear somebody talk about them picking their dog, there's always an instant attraction. It's always something the dog did, or it's just something happens to where the master is attracted to that dog and calls them out. And they know, and they say, I want that one. And so it makes me think about the relationship we have with God, just as him being the omnipotent God that he is, and where he says, I want you. I have called you. And so I think about that dog that may have gone through trials and tribulations, that was probably once homeless out on the street, but here it is, they have a master now, and the master has vowed to them, I will not hurt you, I will not leave you, I will not forsake you, I have called you, you are mine. And so I believe that is the type of God that we serve, and that is what God is telling us today, that do not be disappointed by the events of your past. Do not be discouraged by your current situation, because God has called us, that he is here to protect us. And speaking of protection, in verses 11 through 12, God completely changes his tone. I sort of like this, because God was like, he was coming through like a warrior. He says, all who rage against you will surely be ashamed and disgraced. Those who oppose you will be nothing in Paris. Those who search for your enemies will not find, and those who wage war against you will surely be nothing at all. For I am your God, who takes hold of your right hand, and I say to you, do not fear, I will help you. And so I read that, and I was just like, it's a totally different tone. It's a totally different tone. I feel like God goes from confessing his love by saying, hey, I'm never going to leave you. I'm here for you. And he's just confessing that love unto us like a parent does. I think about a child when they are going to school for the first time. And for so many kids, I don't know if you see this, but so many kids will cry on the first day of kindergarten because they don't want to leave their parents. It's just a devastating time. Honestly, I mean, I'm not a kid, so I just really can't comprehend or understand it. But for some kids, it's just the thought of their mother or their father not being there, and they're in a completely new surrounding and situation. It's terrifying for them. And God is basically saying, like that parent says to that child that day, I'll be back. I'm not leaving you. And see, I think about when a parent has to leave a child, and I know sometimes the parent hurts to leave the child, but at the same time, you know your child has to go to school. You know, in order to be a successful little girl, successful little boy, in order to learn the mechanical skills, the physical skills, in order to advance themselves in this lifetime, sometimes you got to go through things by yourself. And so there may be times in which you have felt that God has been distant, or you may feel like God's presence is no longer there. But I want to tell you that God did not leave you, that God is watching from a distance, but at the same time, God is watching you grow. God is watching you go from 3rd grade to 4th grade. God is watching you advance yourself. God is watching you get a higher education so that you have the skills that are required to live out this Christian lifestyle for him. And so God, he's not gonna place all these disappointments in your life just for you to say, to lose faith. He's placing them in your life for you to learn about yourself, for one, and to learn about him, to learn about how you handle. Will you be faithful to the end? That's one thing I always charge people. You know, despite a discouragement, despite some of the bad situations that we all face in life, are you going to be faithful until the end? And I believe God sometimes allows situations in our lives so that he can continue to build us up, to continue to build our faith up, so that when we are faced with really dramatic situations, we could say, you know what, I've been here before. Honestly, I face more dramatic and terrifying situations than this, and this is not going to be nothing for me. But also in verses 11 through 13, I just like I said, I really love God's tone and how he's like that warrior. And I see him as that protector. You know, he's just like, you can't hurt, you're not going to hurt what's mine. You know, first God calls us out, but then he goes a step further to say, since you are mine, you are my treasured possession, nothing will hurt you. And so it made me think about a couple weeks ago, I was with some friends and we all went out. And, you know, some people were drinking and one boy got out of line. And I was there with one of my good friends and her fiance. And the fiance, he's a little hothead, but in this situation, he was very much right. And so one of the guys said something that was really sort of nasty to me. And so Eric basically stood up and was like, what did you say to her? And, you know, tried to correct the situation. And my friend Marjorie just sat there, and I remember just sort of laughing at her because she was just like, this is my husband and he's still defending our honor. You know, like to her it was so amusing, and just like she looked at him just like, oh honey, I love you, because he was willing to stand up for what was his. You know, he did not want any harm to come into his wife's lives, into the lives of his wife's friend, and so he took a stand for us. And I believe the same way that Eric stood up to represent us and to defend us, that's how God is. And that's what God is saying in verses 11 through 13, that no harm will come near you. He's saying, I am here. I will protect you. I will be all that you need me to be. And so I just want to tell somebody to do not be disappointed. Do not let the disappointments in life discourage you. Do not let the disappointments in life continue to bring you down. And then finally, I want to talk about delay. Delay is, oh my gosh, delay can get pretty bad. Delay sometimes for me is like, whew, Lord, sometimes like, you pray for patience and here you go. You get a little delay in your life. So to delay means to impede the progress of. To impede the progress. It does not mean that the progress is not being made. It just means that it's being impeded on. It's slowing it down. But see, sometimes as Christians, God just ain't moving fast enough for us. That's the problem. We just don't move on the same timetable as he does. And so a little delay, we often look at it as denial, when that is not the truth by any means. And so God is saying in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, he says, be confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. And so I want to marinate about that for a little while, about how he has begun a good work and he will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. And so that automatically made me think about how God is just, he's the Alpha and the Omega. Yes. He is the beginning and the end. And it says here that he has begun a good work. Not just any old work, by the way, but a good work. He has begun a good work. And so I look at God, and I don't think he's the type that's going to start something and not finish it. I don't think he's like me, because that's the type of person I am. I'll start something, but I don't always finish them. But I don't think God is like that. You know, I don't think some of the situations that happen in your life are just for coincidence. You see, God is working out a plan that in which you can't even see, and you're focused on the overall result, but God is focused on the progress. You see, God is slowing some things down in order to catch you up to speed so that your progress can be made. So he slows down the progress of something of your heart's desire, some of the things that you've been praying for. He's going to slow that down a little bit to get your attention and to get you up to speed to where you need to be. So by the time the result that you want to happen is there and you are able to handle it. You see, I wrote a Facebook comment the other day that I would say power to the people, but I've came to the realization that a lot of people can't handle power. You see, so many times we ask God for these, God, please give me this, give me that. Our heart's desire, Lord, if you just give me out of this one more time, or Lord, this we want. But at the same time, if God were to give us some of the things that we very much desire, if he gave us that power, could we even handle it? You see, some people need instruction. Some people need thorough instruction. I'm actually learning this on my job because a lot of the people that I work with, they came from an environment that they were often micromanaged, and they were used to people telling them what to do. Do this, do that, do this, do that. Well, me, I'm a completely type of person. I tell them, okay, I need this to be done. And I don't really give them direction on how to do it because I leave it up to the person. Because everybody is different, right? Everybody is different. Everybody does stuff differently. And so the way I do it may not be the best way for Johnny to do it. You know, so I leave it up to Johnny. But some people, they need that direction. You know? And so many people, though, what's crazy is that they always say, like, oh, you know, I just wish my manager would sort of let me do what I want to do. And I would do this and I would do that. But then when the time is given, they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do. And so likewise, there's so many times and we're like, God, if you did this, then I'll do this. Or if I'll do this, will you do this? And we try to make these bargains with God. But then when he comes through and he gives us a little bit, just a little bit of the very things in which we're asking for, we don't know how to handle it. But overall, I just want to tell you to be encouraged. Do not be disappointed by life. And do not worry about a little impeding on your progress, because God, as I said, he is not he's the author of our story, and he's began a great story of your life, and I'm sure that it will conclude in a beautiful ending. And so I want to tell somebody to hang in there. Whatever your heart's desire is, just hang in there. You know, don't entertain the devices of the enemy. He's always going to come with certain things. You can bet your bottom dollar that the minute you have something in your heart and you have that fire, that passion, that motivation, he tries to distract you. He tries to destroy you. He will bring chaos into your world. It's the same devices all the time. He will try to divide your attention by distraction. That's something that always happens to me. He will try to distract me with so many other things. And so I just want to leave you saying that, you know, David did it, why can't you? You know, discouragement, you know, is just a common response to the challenges of life. And even David, who experienced great spiritual triumphs, had tremendous emotional struggles. And in Psalms 42, verse 11, he wrote, "Why are you in despair, O my soul? For why have you become disturbed with enemy? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him." And so I want to tell you, somebody, praise your way to encouragement. If you can't be encouraged, you just praise God for the things you don't know he's doing in your life. Yes. You know, continue to praise him, and that is what is needed to take you to the next level. Praying to God, praising him is what will get you out of that spiritual rut. You see, the enemy will try to use depression. All these things lead up to depression. And it's like, that's what he wants. He wants people to be stagnant in their walk. He wants you to be like the children of Israel, who are scared to go into the promised land because it's something different, because it's something new, because it may be a dark area to them. But as I said, Moses said to them, be strong, be courageous. You know, stay, have heart. Have heart, despite life's disappointments, despite the things that may not have happened yet, they are going to happen. I'm telling you now, there's been many discouraging days with my business and trying to manage it all, but at the same time, you'd be surprised what a difference a day makes. Some of the times where I have some of my weakest moments are filled with the greatest accomplishments the very next day. And so I want to tell you that the feelings that you are feeling of discouragement, of disappointment, and when you look at all the negativity in your world right now, I just want to say hold on, because those things are temperamental. That God has an alternative plan for you to execute the things that he wants you to do. And if God has brought you this far, I reassure you that he will not leave you behind. That the desires that he placed within you, the passions, the ideas, you be like Steve Jobs said, and you continue to execute. You keep moving forward into the things that you want in life. Move forward and take hold, take heed. Press forward until you grab those things and make it a reality. Do not be defeated by the fictional things in your mind, the fictional things that the enemy tries to plant. That you know, try to make you seem like things are bigger than they really are. But no, you go forth and you conquer and make these things a reality. And so I just hope that I was able to bring a word of encouragement for someone today. And